chapter 6, verse 1. On that night, the sleep of the sovereign fled, and he commanded to bring the book of the records of the annals, and they were read before the sovereign. This is important, for we see how Yahweh does everything, how perfect Yahweh is. For he, the king in this case, went to bed, but he just couldn't fall asleep. So he asked to get the chronicles pretty much of his reign, of his kingdom, to bring them to him so that he could read them and then fall asleep. That would help to get him on board. So he has to read something that he had not read for a long time in order to use it for him to be able to fall asleep. So on that night, the sleep of the sovereign fled, and he commanded to bring the book of the records of the annals, and they were read before the sovereign. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigtan, in this case as Bigtana, let me see, because they will be adding a letter in this, Bigtana, and Teresh. Remember the two who conspire against the king, who, like we had seen, could represent, because of that conspiration, the two beasts of Revelation 13. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigtana and Teresh, two of the sovereign's eunuchs, the doorkeepers, who had sought to lay hands on sovereign Ahasuerus. The doorkeepers, just like when I was explaining it the other day, right? Bigtana or Bigtan and Teresh were a representation of the beast of the earth, the beast of the sea and the beast of the earth, meaning the world leader, the religious leader, who represents Samael and Hillel. And then Haman, which would be the third, would represent the false Messiah, and in that case, Azazel, right, as the three Satans. Now, as I was saying earlier in the previous chapter, when we take it in general and in a more, I guess, simple way, then Haman represents in general Satan. So we would connect him with the mighty one of this world, Hillel. And I say, when it is in general, when we get specific, then we can separate it even more, the story. And we see that there were doorkeepers, right? Like those who have authority to open and close, just like Samael and Hillel had authority over the people. And they pretty much closed the doors so that people would not be able to find Yahweh, because they wanted to keep the worship for themselves, the honor, the credit, and everything else. So it says, who had sought to lay hands on sovereign Ahasuerus. And as we know, Samael and Hillel, as the doorkeepers, got together and planned Mashiach's death. And they killed Mashiach 2,000 years ago, not knowing that Yahweh would resurrect them. And through that, they would lose authority. So now we have Mordecai giving testimony, for Mordecai represents the witness. And he shows who were the ones who wanted to kill, or who killed, in this case, Mashiach, in this case, who wanted to kill Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus was saved through it, but he never actually read what was written about it until this day, when Yahweh kept him awake. So the day before the feast, when Haman is planning to kill the entire nation, all of a sudden, he cannot fall asleep. So he asks for the records. He starts reading them, and he realizes that Mordecai, a Yahudi, had saved his life back in the day. So Yahweh makes the king Ahasuerus realize this information, realize this important fact hours before he gets together with Haman and Esther at the feast. So it says, then the sovereign said, what has been done in value or in greatness to Mordecai for this? So through this, we see that he's actually not a bad king. Well, once again, in general, he was a Gentile king, but in this case, in this story, in this book, represents Mashiach. So we see that it was righteous. He wanted justice to be done. He just didn't know. In the same matter with the fact that he had, through Haman, signed a letter for all the people in his kingdom to be ready to kill the Yahudim, but he didn't know who the Yahudim were. So we see two things that are happening or were happening without the king knowing all the details. But he came to know at the right time to do the right thing. So that is Yahweh working behind the scenes and now making the king know about it so that he may want to give a reward to Mordecai. So he's thinking that any reward was given to these men, right? In this case, it says that then the sovereign said, "What has been done in value or in greatness to Mordecai for this?" And the sovereign servants who attended him said, "Naught has been done for him." It says, and the sovereign said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had come into the outer court of the sovereign's palace to speak to the sovereign to hang Mordecai on the wooden structure that he had prepared for him. So remember that in the previous chapter, in the last verse, Zeresh, Haman's wife, told him to go in the morning of the same day of the feast that they had with Esther, to go in the morning and ask for Mordecai's life. So in this moment, Haman happens to be at the right moment, at the right time, for he was looking for the king to tell him to kill Mordecai. Yet hours earlier, the king had read that Mordecai had saved him. So he was asking for a way to give Mordecai a reward. So this is so perfect. Where it says, now Haman had come into the outer court of the sovereign's palace to speak to the sovereign to hang Mordecai on the wooden structure that he had prepared for him. And the sovereign's servants said to him, "Look, Haman is standing in the court." And the sovereign said, "Let him come in." And when Haman came in, the sovereign asked him, "What is to be done for the man whom the sovereign delights to value?" So imagine, because we know Haman, we already know a little bit of Haman's personality, and he's wicked and empty and vain and a narcissist. So when he comes into to see the king into the palace, and he hears this from the king, he thinks that the king is talking about him. He thinks that the king just doesn't want to say the name to keep the surprise, right, or whatever. So it says, "What is to be done for the man whom the sovereign delights to value?" Now Haman thought in his heart, "Whom would the sovereign delight to value more than me?" So you see, Haman, because of his vanity and so on and so forth, in his heart actually thought, who would he want to honor? It makes no sense for him to want to honor somebody else than me. So he must be talking about me. So I'm gonna tell him what I want, so that when he tells me that it was me whom he was speaking about, then I will act surprised, all humble, and then get what I want in the first place, right? So this is pretty much the train of thought of Haman. Since he feels above everybody, he thinks nobody will he want to honor other than me. So he says, well, since he asked me without telling me that it's me, I'm going to tell him what I want and then act humble when he tells me it's me. Yet I'll get what I want. So this is key, because here it is also said even that Yahweh had told Ahasuerus, the king, in a dream, that through a certain dream, that Haman wanted to get rid of Ahasuerus and take his throne. But it was a dream, so he was starting to put everything together. And the answer that Haman is about to give Ahasuerus pretty much was the seal on that confirmation, or on that interpretation that he had of the dream. So now Haman thought in his heart, whom would the sovereign delight to value more than me? And Haman answered the sovereign, for the man whom the sovereign delights to value, let a royal robe be brought with the sovereign, which the sovereign has worn. So look at that. He's asking for the person to be dressed in the clothing of the king that he has worn already. Pretty much like saying, give him what belongs to you. Your clothing, give it to him. And as we know, the clothing represents the body. So this is pretty much Hillel showing that his desire was to be like the Most High, that he wanted to take his place. In fact, well, this pretty much comes to confirm the broader interpretation that I have mentioned regarding Haman representing Azazel, Bigtan and Teresh representing Samael and Hillel. For Samael thought he was the only one, and in his emptiness and blindness said he was the only one, yet within his heart he knew that it wasn't, yet he didn't care to say it and try to be it, yet it was shown that he is not. Then Hillel wanted to be like the Most High once it was revealed who is the Most High through the falling of Samael. So Samael thought he was. Hillel wanted to be like. But now we have the Antichrist or false Messiah. Anti from the Greek, anti means instead of. So it is one who wants to take the place of. So it is kind of the mix of the desire of Samael to be the only one and the desire of Hillel to be like the one. If we mix that, is to be the one who takes the place of the one. And therefore, you are the only one who is like the one who was before. So Azazel is pretty much the mix of the desire of Samael and Hillel. And it is what we are being shown here in the scriptures through the desire of, let a royal robe be brought which the sovereign has worn. So he wants to be dressed in the clothing of the king, not just any clothing, the one that he has already worn. And a horse on which the sovereign has ridden. So one of his horses, and an actual one that he has ridden on. One with a royal crest placed on his head. Right? For he wants to be seen as the king himself, with his clothing, his horse, his royal crest. And let this robe and horse be given into the hand of one of the sovereign's most noble princes. So not only all of that he already asked for, he says, let this robe and horse be given into the hand of one of the sovereign's most noble princes. Let them dress the man whom the sovereign delights to value. So pretty much do that, get it all together, then use one of the noble princes, meaning someone who is super important. Use somebody who's super important to go and get him and get him dressed and get him prepared, so that everybody that sees this will see how important he is, for they sent someone so important, a noble prince, to get him and to get him dressed. Let them dress the man whom the sovereign delights to value and make him ride on horseback through the city square and proclaim before him. Thus it is done to the man whom the sovereign delights to value. Whom the sovereign delights to value. Verse 9. So it says, and the sovereign said to Haman, this is amazing, and I not imagine, though I would so much love to eventually in eternity see this moment from history. And the sovereign said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have spoken, and do so for Mordecai, the Yahudi who sits in the south gate. Let no word fail of all that you have spoken. Imagine everything that Haman wanted, a representation of everything that Satan, Samael, Hillel, and Azazel has wanted. All of a sudden is going to be given to the one whom the enemy has hated. Mashiach, in this case, the last, the prodigal son, for is represented by Mordecai. And in this case, Ahashverosh as the king being the one giving the order. So it is like, well, once again, when I put it in the broader interpretation, Hillel, who wanted to be like the Most High, now has to make Michael like the Most High, get him dressed with a body that Yahweh has worn. And in that case, that is become one with Mashiach. For Mashiach is the body that Yahweh used in this reality. Satan wanted to become, well, take Mashiach's place. He cannot even imagine to become. So here we have that the king says, and the sovereign said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse. And that is why also we see that the last comes on a white horse in the first seal, the witness like Moshe. And the robe, for he comes as King of Kings. Mashiach came as the priest, the last comes as a king. As you have spoken, as it has been written. For remember that Hillel, like I said, was in charge of the second heaven and even of this reality. That's why he's called the God of this world. But he used that authority to try and destroy the people of Yahweh. And he ended up killing Mashiach because of his envy towards him and his power and all of that. So after he killed Mashiach and Yahweh resurrected Mashiach, Hillel lost his authority over those who believe in Mashiach. Now, as it says here, as you have spoken, and do so for Mordecai, the Yahudi, who sits in the sovereign's gate. Yahushua is the gate. Satan, like Haman, hates to see the last being united with Mashiach, the good shepherd being at the gate. It is like Haman seeing Mordecai at the gate, for he said to his wife, I cannot stand seeing him at the gate. Right? So this is, I repeat, like a prophecy of how the enemy is going to have to give what he wanted for himself to the last, to the witness like Moshe, who is represented by Mordecai. That's why the last comes and becomes king on a white horse. And as I was saying, as he says here, as you have spoken, for Hillel was in charge of the letter, but the letter kills. That's why Hillel ended up killing. Yet the spirit gives life. That's why Mashiach came to give us the spirit, and he said that Yahweh was looking for those who would worship him in spirit and truth, spirit and truth. Because before that, they had the letter and a lie, which was the wrong interpretation of that letter, which was given to them by Baal. That's why they call the Talmud the Torah Shebaal Peh, the instruction given by the mouth of Baal. As you have spoken. So Yahweh has used Hillel when it comes to the letter, but he knows all the letters of the Torah, yet he doesn't understand them. That's why he used the scriptures to try and tempt Mashiach. But Mashiach understood the scripture, for he is the manifestation, the fulfillment of them. So he was able to answer with the scriptures to what Hillel was saying, looking to tempt Mashiach. And the sovereign said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and horse as you have spoken, and do so for Mordecai the Yahudi. So what is written will be manifested with the last as Mordecai, the Yahudi, for he is a Yahudi Mashiach, who sits in the sovereign's gate. Mashiach is the gate. Let no word fail of all that you have spoken, which is like Mashiach said that every single letter that is written will be fulfilled, must be fulfilled. Nothing will fail. And Haman took the robe and the horse. Now, remember that Haman had said, let a prince, a one of the sovereign's most noble princes. So the king says, okay, if that's what he thinks is the best, who's my most noble prince if not Haman? So Ahasuerus was even giving him honor by doing this, but that was the petition that Haman gave for the one whom the king would want to value. So the king says, who's my most noble prince is Haman. So Haman, you go and do it. So imagine what it was for him to now have to serve Mordecai, his enemy. So, and Haman took the robe and the horse and robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square. It is said that Haman was from a family of hairdressers. So he's the one who ended up shaving and cutting Mordecai's hair to prepare him for this meeting or this moment of honor. So imagine all that went through. And Haman took the robe and the horse and robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city through the city square, and proclaimed before him, "Thus it is done to the man the sovereign delights to value." So that is like now the enemy being used to show to the world who the last is, who has found favor in Yahweh and Mashiach size, in the sense that, remember that Yahushua in Revelation sends his witness, his malach, to give testimony, the witness like Moshe. So as I've been saying, when we see Hillel as Haman, Ahasuerus would be Yahweh and Mordecai would be Yahushua the first. When we see Haman as Azazel, or the false Messiah, Mordecai is the witness like Moshe, and Ahasuerus is Yahushua. And since first and last become one, we could say that both interpretations become one. For the history repeats itself. So Mashiach's story will be fulfilled once again in a little bit of a different way. First with the Israelites, now with the Gentiles. So then Mordecai went back to the sovereign's gate. This is interesting, for even though he just received all this honor, he doesn't change. He is the same. He remains the same. He's humble. He just goes back to the gate where he was at first. To him, what just happened was nothing, but to Haman was everything. Then Mordecai went back to the sovereign's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning and with a covered head. This is interesting for a couple of reasons. Well, like I just said, one, how sad Haman was, in the sense of, as a person, as an empty, vain soul. He's the one hurting here. Haman was not changed by the fact that he just got all that honor. So Mordecai goes back to the gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning, right? As if somebody had died. Pretty much his ego, his vain desires, to be like the king and all of that. And with covered head, which would represent how sad he was. He would have covered it with ashes or something like that, as people would do. However, in Judaism, it is said that there are a couple things that are said, I'll just mention them, that when Mordecai was going to go up on the horse, Haman had to get on his knees, pretty much to be like a footstool for Mordecai to be able to get up on the horse. So he standed on Haman, which he saw as a fulfillment of a prophecy that we would place our foot over our enemies. So he put his both feet, because one after the other, to go up. But it is said in Judaism that when he put one, then when the second was coming, he hit him in the ribs with a kick. And it is said in Judaism that Haman used a verse, or pretty much used the fact of our belief against Mordecai, trying to say, you were not supposed to do that. You're supposed to love your enemy. What are you doing? And Mordecai explained that Haman was not just his enemy. He was the enemy of Yahweh and the enemy of the entire nation, for he wanted to destroy them all. So using another verse, it was allowed for him to kick him, to hurt him. And that was pretty much to show him his place. And what Yahweh was doing, of course, to bring justice in several ways. And this was the first. So not only would have Mordecai kicked Haman when going up on the horse, it is also said in Judaism that Haman had 10 sons and 1 daughter. And when he told them about what he had to do, well, first, when he told them that he was going to be honored by the king, for he thought that he was going to be honored. No, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, so I was adding another part. The daughter, when she saw all the fuss that was going on from the kingdom, and he saw that there was somebody on a horse being honored by the king, and somebody was bringing him, she thought that the one on the horse was her father, and that the one pulling the horse was Mordecai. So she went and got the vessel that they were using in the bathroom to do number 2. So that vessel was big and it was filled with feces. And when they were coming, she thought that the one pulling the horse was Mordecai. So she threw all of those feces on top of the head of that person. And then she realized it was her own father, Haman. So that is the interpretation they give, or the reason they give to this part of the verse that says that he was with covered head. It was covered by feces, according to Judaism. I repeat. But it's a interesting and a bit funny story. And it says, and when Haman related to his wife Zeresh and all his loved ones all that had befallen him, right, when he just went home and told them what had happened, how everything was changed, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is from the seed of the Yahudim, you are not going to prevail against him, but certainly fall before him. So blessed be the Most High for the protection that he gives us, that those who actually know realize that no one can curse those whom Yahweh has blessed. For Mordecai was a blessed one of the seed of Yahudim, and that's why they said, well, if Mordecai is from that line, from the seed of the Yahudim, there's no way you can curse them. There's no way you can hurt them. And it's interesting because these were the ones telling him to go and do it. These were the ones giving advice. Now they are the ones pretty much telling him that there's nothing he can do. So it says, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall. So they already condemned him by saying, you have already begun to fall. It's just a matter of time before you fall all the way. Is from the seed of the Yahudim, as we know, for it's interesting that it doesn't say from the seed of the Israelites, but the seed of the Yahudim. For we know that Yahushua is a Yahudi, and in Yahushua, those who are of the faith of Mashiach, there is no Greek nor Yahudi, for we are all one. But Yahushua is a Yahudi, so that means that those who are in Mashiach are one with him, for the congregation is his body, so they are Yahudim. And Yahudi means he who worships Yahweh, so it makes complete sense. For those who worship Yahweh do so through their faith in Mashiach Yahushua, in his work, through his death and resurrection. So if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, like the last, is from the seed of the Yahudim, for he is in Mashiach at the gate of the king, right? Mashiach is the gate. You are not going to prevail against him, but certainly fall before him. Certainly. While they were still speaking with him, right? They were still speaking with him, telling him what was going on. The sovereign's eunuchs came and hurried to bring Haman to the feast which Esther had prepared. So they were not done speaking, and they came to get him to go to the feast. So here, most likely, he was like, okay, so at least we have some good news. I'm going to be honored by the queen, and we have a feast. So let me get ready and go.